Hello everybody, Megazard here, back at it again to give you all another very exciting collection reflection video where I take the time out to just go through my whole entire gaming library. It could be a game, could be a console, or it could be a limited edition. But today, oh dude, I'm done doing it. It's time to talk about Pokemon Sword. Look, I'm usually pretty enthusiastic about most games I talk about in my collection reflection series though, but you know it was only a matter of time before I talk about one that's either mixed or somewhat kind of baddish, and today just kind of happened to be the day though, because if y'all remember anything about the lead up to this game coming out for the Nintendo Switch, that national Dex thing was trending on Twitter. I felt like weeks on end. I had some friends that were extremely heated, fume coming out of the side of their ears, like, oh my goodness gracious. Like, it was hard to talk to some people back in the day, whether they were on one side of the fence absolutely hating it, or you were on the other side of the fence and you still loved the Pokemon series though, and you were still kind of trying to back them up for what it is though. But oh my gosh, this is going to be a mixed bag of beans for this one video though, so we might as well go ahead and jump up in it though. But if you hadn't already done so, make sure you're going to hit that like button, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing. And if you're curious to want to support the channel just a little bit more, then feel free to hit that join link down below. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight up into this video. Pokemon Sword and by extension Pokemon Shield were some very divisive games when it came out on the scene back in 2019. Look, I could even think back to the original Pokemon Presents that it did in February of 2017, and they first revealed the games and stuff. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, you know what? I was very excited for the Pokemon series finally being able to be on a dedicated home console. While yes, it still was a hybrid system with the Nintendo Switch, and you still had, you know, basically a handheld version of it. And then by extension, when we got the Switch Lite on the market, you can play it all in handheld mode. The fact that we could actually play a Pokemon game fully on the console, not on your Game Boy Advance, your DS, or even the Nintendo 3DS, be able to play that sucker on the flat screen, that was a pipe dream for the longest time, with it not being like associated with a Pokemon Stadium like game though. So I was enthusiastic and over the moon. I was like, this could be the game for Game Freak and saying, hey, we're really going to push the Pokemon medium now, because now we're in the home console business, baby. But when we first got revealed that little bit of a showcase though, they were getting a little bit ambitious, even much more so to the point of where they said, hey, you know what? You had those traditional linear routes that you have on any kind of Pokemon game, right? Well, now we're going to include this area that we're going to dub as the wild area. It was your first kind of an open 3D worldish atmosphere, but relocated to a specific zone in this one particular case, where it was kind of pretty close to the beginning of the game. It's like, what, you beat like a couple of gym leaders or so, and then boom, you're right there to the wild area. And it was really cool. You got to be able to go through and catch a whole bunch of different Pokemon up in that thing. They had different biomes and stuff. Like one that was like almost a little bit of a deserty, but you had different water terrains over there. The weather effects will change from time in and time out. That kind of diversified the landscape just a little bit though. But it was really cool and ambitious to see random old Pokemon being perfectly exposed out in normal. We're always used to the random encounters within any given Pokemon game. Like anytime you hit a bush of grass, you didn't know what was going to pop out of it. The only kind of indication that you knew you were about to challenge a specific Pokemon is whenever you had those legendary or special encounters with specific Pokemon, like your Shiny Red Gyarados or something like a Mewtwo, where you could clearly see them and you knew what you were about to fight. But outside of that, you always had random encounters. And I love that aspect that they took in this game and incorporated it into the fact that you could see exactly what you're about to run into in battle, which took a lot of the grinding out in terms of like just being able to find specific Pokemon. Because I can't tell you how many times I was running around left and right, up and down, and trying to find a specific Pokemon. But within the wild area, it made it seamless though. But I think it kind of did come at a fault because of what I just mentioned earlier. It was only in a specific area of the game. Once you got beyond the wild area, it went back to traditional routes. Yes, luckily it was cool because you still got to see random Pokemon still walking on the individual routes, which was really nice though. But then every now and then you could go into the grass and have those random encounters though. And then it was like, oh, all right, that's kind of cool. And then obviously later on in Scarlet and Violet, they took the random encounters out completely. And you know, you were able to see every Pokemon you encountered though. So they managed to evolve upon that over time though. But in this one game, that's just kind of how it works. So I think that was like one of the better things you had to look forward to in this particular game though. But then, oh gosh, then you know, Man, rewind the clock all the way back. What was it, 2019? This was before E3 was, officially shut down and before the events of COVID. Just keep that all in mind, though. But rewind it back to E3 of 2019, because I remember, Nintendo and whoever they had at the Treehouse at the time, they were sitting down in their chairs and stuff, and they were playing through parts of Sword and Shield. And when they sat down and said something on the lines of, oh yeah, you're not going to be able to have every single Pokemon playable in these games. Somehow it was kind of showcase off, or not really showcase off. They kind of said something on the lines of that. And then there was like a little bit of a press release a little bit after the fact. And oh shoot, you talking about the internet going up in flames? Man, that National Dex thing, I felt like was trending weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Like it was crazy to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, you had people in some heated debates over there. You had other people that, Joe Merrick, who normally runs Serbia and whatever, though, he was kind of defending or saying certain call outs or whatever, though, about a few different things, though. And even he got thrown underneath the bus a few different times, though, just for saying things that he liked and enjoyed, or things that, whatever he personally felt. And man, oh man, everybody hated the fact that moving from that point forward, starting in Generation 8, with this game, you were not going to be able to use every single Pokemon that was up in the Pokemon series history. In which case, in my personal opinion, don't roast me over the coals though, but are you legitimately using every single Pokemon in a given game? Like, yes, everybody has their favorites, and yes, I completely understand for you to be able to have a game where you have all those Pokemon exist, so you can whip and pull them out at whatever way you kind of choose and please, though. But I think this kind of came down to the fact that I think for them, with them being on those 3-year cycles, it's hard for them to go through and competitively balance every single one of these Pokemon with the roster getting so big. Right now, as a point of Scarlet and Violet, we have over 1,000 Pokemon. It's going to be ridiculously hard to always go through and balance all of that mess out. Now, yes, you probably could have some modes up in there where it's just like, hey, you just can't use these Pokemon, and that'll kind of balance it out a little bit, though. But it does take time. And it's something that the Pokemon company just doesn't really do that quite well because of just how big Pokemon is as a whole, though. So I think that was like one of the big major knacks that everybody could probably always remember with this one game in particular, though. So it was just some crazy times back then, though. But in terms of like performance, the way how the game looked and stuff like that, I would still remember the fact that people were walking around in that game and they were just taking pictures of the trees. And it's like, man, that looks like a tree straight out of Ocarina of Time. It was a savage time on the internet in the lead up to that game in particular. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to dig up a lot of this stuff, though. I'd love to see all the thoughts that y'all had in the comment section down below, because I know those were some crazy old times, though. But regardless of the fact, I thought the game was, outside of the stuff that I mentioned, everything else about the game was still pretty solid. Like, you had some really cool Pokemon up in there. The gym leader battles were really cool. I like coming off of Gen 7 where it was like, you didn't have any gyms. Now you got the gyms back. I know you had the whole feature with like Dynamaxing or Gigantamaxing up in this game, in which case I was like, I thought it was somewhat kind of cool, but it wasn't that crazy or anything like that, though. I think the other major tidbit you could probably take out of this game is just the story itself. Mind you, it is a Pokemon game. It's not like a crazy RPG, like a Square Enix game or something like that, like a Final Fantasy or anything like that, an Octopath Traveler. No, the story was still pretty basic at the end of the day. They didn't do anything crazy, and I saw the plot twist from a mile away. So I'm like, that in itself, I was like, yeah, whatever, though. I don't know. But yeah, that was mostly it in terms of like, the main objective that you had within the baseline game of Sword and Shield. Granted, these games did manage to get DLC. Now, what we're normally accustomed to before with Sun and Moon and every game before it, what will be considered as that third game, like your Pokemon Emerald, your Pokemon Platinum, your Black 2 and White 2, or even somehow we missed Pokemon Z, but thankfully we have Pokemon Legends ZA now. Or even your Ultra Sun and your Ultra Moon. All of those had to get a brand new game when they want to kind of do like an expansion upon the original game. So however, with them being on modern day consoles now in the age of DLC, this is the first time we managed to get an actual DLC expansion for a Pokemon game. So no more that you would need to buy, what was it? Sword, Shield, and what could have been a Pokemon Gun. That was like the running theory for the longest time, though. But yeah, they managed to give us 2 different expansion packs, one that released around the summertime, one that released around the holiday time. The first one being the Isle of Armor, which included like a couple of new legendaries up in that. And that was a completely open, wild area, and it was expanded upon. So everywhere where you're running around was technically what you could have been considered as a wild area in the baseline game, which I thought was really clever. And the same thing carried over to the Crown Tundra. obviously with that name, you had a few more different legendaries and stuff, and it was mostly like a frozen kind of topography for a good chunk of that area, though. A little further south of the Galar region and stuff, though. So I did like those DLC expansions. Looking back at it now, it didn't seem like anything super substantial, though, but it did give you a little bit more stuff to do. It did be able to give them, you know, a good reason to say, hey, we're going to actually add in more Pokemon into this game. So now the roster got a little bit bigger. So I can appreciate it on that regard as well, though. But overall, I thought the game was okay. I didn't even talk about the starters. Like, what, we had Scorbunny, Grookey, and gosh, I can't even remember the name of the water Pokemon, though. But I mean, he wasn't nothing crazy or something like that. My favorite was Scorbunny. Look, I'm always a fire type person. Gotta rep the red and all of that stuff, though. So I always went with Scorbunny up on there. Thought he was a pretty cool starter. It wasn't nothing like something stupid crazy or anything like that, though. But thought he had a very nice design. Rillaboom, his final form had a really cool one. The water one was kind of acting like all spyish. With his, like, he's not wearing clothes, but it looks like the dude's wearing clothes or whatever, though. I don't know. But overall, between all three of those starters, they weren't necessarily bad. We had worse in times past, though. But I thought this one was a pretty solid 3, all things considering, though. And I think that's basically encompasses most of my experiences with Pokemon Sword. But y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section down below what all that you think about Sword and Shield. Do you really love these games? Or are you gonna fall into that traditional Pokemon cycle of where it's like the games get bashed really bad at the start of whenever we manage to either get them announced or we get them first in our hands. X amount of years manages to go by, and then all of a sudden people come up out the woodworks like, oh man, that game was actually really good. Man, we got this mess documented all over the internet. I do not want to hear one of y'all come out in the next 7 to 8 years and say, you know what, Sword and Shield was actually really good. The games we got right now that currently come out with what will be a Pokemon Generation 10, 11, or 12, those are bad ones. I don't want to hear it, not one bit. Mark my words. Oh, good gracious. All right. I think that's all I got to say about Pokemon Sword and Shield. In theory, good concept games. It was just the execution within these games that I just wasn't really a personal strong fan with, because literally I'm looking back at the story and everything else that happened in this game, and I'm like, most of it kind of feels like a blur. I ain't gonna lie, though. But yeah, that's gonna basically do it in terms of today's video, though. But if you really like this, make sure you're gonna hit that like button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing. So remember, y'all, until whatever video I make next, see y'all.